Alright guys, welcome back. In this video we're going to create some helper functions just to start, and you guys will see how these work pretty easily, and they're basically just little helpers that we can use in our views or whatever to build out quick form elements that have the wrappers and everything that we want like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to say we're going to go into our app and the lib, and inside the helpers let's actually create a new file, and we'll just call this form_helpers.php, and we need to go into our functions here, PHP file, and include this. So we'll just copy this line down here and just go ahead and put form_helpers. That's all we need to do, and that's going to require in this form helpers file. So we can close functions.php. We don't need this anymore. So close that. And then what we're going to do is create just a few functions. So we want to create a function called input. So go ahead and open PHP tags. Okay. And we'll create a function that we're going to call input block. Okay. And this is going to take quite a few parameters. So the first parameter is going to be type. So we can tell it what type of input we want. The next one will be label. The next one will be our name, which will be used for the name and the ID of the thing. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pass in the default value, but by default it's just going to be an empty string. Okay. And then we're going to give the ability to do some options on the input. You know what, we'll call these attributes here. Input attributes. Yeah, maybe we'll just do that. And we're going to make that equal to an empty array. And then we're going to do div attributes as well. We'll make that equal to an empty array. And we'll open and close this. So I know that's a lot of deals here, but you don't actually need these if you don't want. You're likely going to use value though, and only need these if you need to add something specific attribute to the things. Okay, I know that doesn't make sense right now, but let's move along. So let's just create an HTML variable, and we're going to go ahead and at the end of this here, let's just return the HTML. Alright, so right here what we want to do is we're going to open a div, and we're not going to put the closing tag on yet. You know what? We are going to need to jump out of this function real quick and create another function. So let's leave this here just like that, and let's create another function called stringify attributes. Okay. And we're going to just pass in attributes here, and I promise this will make sense, so just hang tight. So just go ahead and do string equals an empty string, and we'll jump down here and we're going to just return string. Okay, and then what we actually want to do is loop through, because attributes here could be an array. So we're going to say for each attributes as a key value pair, we are going to add to our string. So you can do a dot equals a space inside of quotes there, and then we're going to append on the key, and then we're going to append right there on key, we'll append an equal sign, and the equal sign needs a double quote here, just a single double quote. So I know it looks weird. So look, it's got a single quote, an equal sign, a double quote, and another single quote. And then it's going to be a value. And then we're going to append on to that a set of single quotes with one double quote in the middle, just to close that out. Okay? So what this is basically doing is taking an array full of attributes that would be, you know, if you look at it, so here's what we're going to do. Let's say we had an attribute called class equals red, and then it had another one called ID is a bad one, but let's say on click equals something, you know, turn false. Okay? This is how you would build an HTML element. And so what we can do now is we can actually pass into this attributes here. This attributes could be attributes is equal to an array, and the way this would look would be class red, and then it would be on click, you know, return false. Okay? So that's how we're using this. So this is just extracting this array into this string, and it's going to build this part of it up. Okay? Alright. So that was just for demonstration purposes how this is going to be used, so it makes sense that we're doing this up here. So what we're going to do here is back up in our input block. Now that we have that, we're going to use that. So what we're going to do here is say div string is equal to stringify attributes. All right, and then we're going to pass in the div attributes there. Okay, so then now that we have this div string, we can actually append that on right here. Okay, and then we're going to append onto that, we're going to append the closing div tag there, and that will be it for that line. Next, what we're going to do, and we're just going to make this a new line to make this more readable, but we'll use a dot equals here so that we're adding on to this HTML here. We're concatenating on. So the next thing what we need here is we're going to need a label. So let's do that. Alright, so label and then for equals, and then what we're going to do here is, you know what, let's just build out this whole thing here like this. Okay, but we need to put in some variables here. So here we're going to break out of PHP, or break out of the string here, and we're going to actually pass in name there. Okay, so it's going to take this variable name and put it right there in a for, and then we're going to, right here, we're going to, inside that label, we're going to break out again, and we're going to pass in our label. So that will be what's passed in to this parameter here, will get put here, and I'll give you guys a demonstration on how this works. So then what we're going to do is we'll do an input this time. So we'll do input type equals, we'll do ID equals, we'll do name equals, value equals, and then the last thing that we'll do there is put a closing thing here. But we also need to add these input attributes here as well. So let's do that first. We'll just, right here below our div string, we'll do an input string, and that's going to be stringify attributes, and then we'll pass in the input attributes this time to that function. Okay, and then we can use this right here. So we'll bust out of that string there, put some concatenation there, and we're going to say input string, And actually we'll do a space here and get rid of this space here. Okay. So now we just need to fill in type, ID, name, and value. So for type, what we're going to do is break out again here, and we'll just put in type, and that'll get passed in here. And then for ID, we'll do some single quotes, concatenate, and we're going to pass in name, and we're going to do the exact same thing for name. Okay, and for value, we'll do this, and we'll say value. So it's going to pass this into there. So that's it for the input. So now the only thing that's left to do is we're going to close the div. All right. One last thing that I think, one thing I'd like to do, well, we won't do that now. We can update this later if we want. So let's actually try this out and make sure it works. So let's go, the easiest way to do that is just go to views and go to home and open up the index. And right here underneath this H1, let's just go ahead and try to use this. So the way we'll use this is we'll open some PHP tags and we'll just echo out input block. And let's say this was like a text field, okay? And it's going to be a text field and you're just asking somebody's favorite color or something. I don't know. Okay, so what we'll do there is we'll close that. And for the parameters, we'll pass in the first parameter was the type, so the type is text. The next parameter is label, so we'll say favorite color. The next one was the ID and the name, so we're just going to do what we would enter into the database, so we'll just say favorite underscore color. For our default value, we're going to use a blank string. And we wouldn't normally have to do all of this, but we want to test this out. So we're going to go ahead and do the input attributes and the div attributes as well. So this is going to be an array. This is going to, first is the input attribute. So on the input, let's just do, I don't know, SR only, and we'll say false, okay? And let's do the same exact thing for the oops, this has to be an array. So on the div attributes, this is what this is for. Let's just give it something crazy. I don't know, like data ID, and we'll just say 1. Okay, so let's go back now to and refresh the page, and we have some errors, which means we've made some mistakes. And it says undefined variable value on line 16. So let's take a look at line 16 in form helpers. Yeah, so I did VAL and here I typed out value. So I just need to remove that. Let's try again. And now we have an input and our label here. So we can make that look a little nicer for our application. So let's go back and look at this function now. And I think what we'll do is in this div string here, what we can do is, since you may or may not want to do this, okay, we could pass in the class into here, and that would leave the most flexibility. So let's do that. So instead of data ID equals 1, let's do class, and we're going to say form dash group, okay? And then for the input, instead of SR only, let's do class, and we'll say form dash control, and those are bootstrap classes. Yeah, so what it's done basically is made an input that's 100% width, which is the standard bootstrap thing. So you usually put this in some sort of column, but this looks correct. I know it looks crazy right now, but this is actually correct, and it gives this some bold styling and does a line break afterwards. But what's cool is if we actually go and inspect this, let's look at what HTML was generated here. So this right here, from here to here, was actually generated by our function. So if you look at it, div class, and then added the label, and then it added the input, and you can see that the text, ID, name, value, and class were all put in there. So it's working correctly. Let's go ahead now and let's see if we would give it a default value of red. Let's try that just to make sure it works. I'm certain that it will. We'll refresh, and of course there it is, red. All right. So you can see how that works. It's just what this allows us to do is just make really clean views and use these input blocks instead of having to type out a bunch of HTML here. This is totally not necessary. You could just type out plain HTML here. I just thought I would show you guys how you might build a few helper functions just to simplify life a little bit. So writing the functions is a little bit painful at first, but once we've done that, it makes things a lot easier. So what we also want to be able to do is we want a submit tag, and probably make a submit block as well, and that'll be it for now. But what that'll allow us to do is create a button that's inside of a div on the right side of the screen, or if we just want a button in general, we'll do the submit tag itself. So let's go back to form helpers and let's see what this looks like. First of all, right underneath this function, we'll create a new function, and we'll call this thing submit tag. Okay, this one's going to be the easier of the two functions, but they're all easy. So open and close that, and then the parameters that we're going to need to pass this is we want to know the button text. Okay, we want to know pass any sort of input attributes, and we'll also do a default there, so you don't have to do that. And we're also going to do div attributes. I think you guys can kind of see what this pattern is going to be here. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to create our div string, and we're going to of course use our stringify attributes function, and we're going to pass in our div attributes. Oops, I got a capital T there. Alright, and then we'll do that same thing again for our input. So input string equals stringify attributes, and this time we're going to do the input attributes here. Alright, so this is going to be actually there's no div on this one, so we don't actually need to do the div. Sorry about that, I'm looking at the wrong function on my reference. So what we'll do is that's the input string. So we actually, this is going to be real easy. We'll just say HTML is equal to, and a button would look like an input with a type of equal to submit, and a value. Okay, and it would be a closing thing here. So really simple here. Let's see. Let's bust out right here at the end. So it's the single quotes and the two periods, and we're going to input our input string right there, if there is one. And then the only other thing we need to do here is for a value attribute, we're going to pass in our button text. So let's see what that looks like. So here after our input group, we'll test this out, and we're going to say submit tag, and we'll just call this a button. We'll say save, and then we'll give it, for the attributes, let's do a class of button and button primary. think that's the bootstrap for that. So let's go ahead, I'll close this here, we don't really need that. Hit refresh, and I have an error. So let's go back. 16, you guys probably saw this. I don't have my semicolon there on line 15. So refresh, and we see nothing. And that's because on our submit tag we didn't return anything. Silly, you have to return what we're generating. And now if we refresh, we have a save button. Yay! So let's go ahead and inspect that. And it gives us an input with a type of submit, with a value, and the class. So that's really cool. That's a quick way to make a submit button on a form. But we may want to actually, on a form, create an entire div and send that thing off to the right or something. So I don't know if you would do that or not, but I just want to kind of give you guys a few ideas on how you can build these helpers to make your forms really quick and easy to create. So let's create a new one called function, let's call it submit block. This can be very similar to submit tag, but we'll give it the button text. We're going to give it input attributes, and this time we are going to give it the div attributes. All right, and what we'll do here is we're going to say a div string is equal to stringify attributes. We're going to pass in our div attributes there, and then we'll do input string stringify attributes input attributes. All right, and then what we'll do is we're going to say HTML is equal to, and we'll start off with our div, and let's see. I think what we'll do here actually is we'll say class. This is probably a bad idea, but I'm just going to do this to give you guys, just to give you guys like, I don't like how I'm doing this. That's okay. Here's what we'll do. We're going to leave div, and then we're going to say right here we're going to break out of that, and we're going to put our div string right here, and we're going to continue on with the HTML, and we're going to say here we're going to put our input, and again this is going to be a type of submit, and a value equals, and close those. All right, so the next thing, all we need to do here is we're going to break out of that, and we're going to pass in our input string, and then for value we'll break out of that, and we're going to pass in button text again. And then the last thing that we need to do here is close our div tag. So HTML dot equals, and we'll close our div. Now this time we need to make sure that we return the HTML. Now let's go and try to build one of those out. So let's change the submit tag here to a submit block, and we will add our div attributes, and we're actually going to say class, and we'll say text right. What that should do, yep, so what that does is it basically wraps this button in a div, and it will send it to the right. I'm going to tell you that, in my opinion, probably use just the submit tag more often, because we might have other buttons here and we don't want to be limited to this, but it just gives us an option. So that's all, guys. This will be sufficient for what we need for our forms. So I don't think we're going to add any more here, but you guys would be able to do all kinds of stuff here. You can add select tags and radio buttons and everything else you want to do, and then later when you're building out your forms in your framework, you would be able to just quickly and easily build a form with very little code, and it'll look really nice when you're looking at the code in your view files. All right, well, I'm going to wrap that up. That's a little bit longer of a video, and we will come in the next video and start building our contact management app with our newly created framework. But one thing that you could consider doing at this point is saving this off, the framework, as a separate file somewhere, so that you have a fresh copy that doesn't have anything in it that you can start new projects from. And so in the next video, we're going to start a new sample project on what it would be like to use our framework. All right, guys, well, I hope that helps, and I'll see you in the next video.